I think he's going to live up to what he told me, and I think he's going to fulfill his part of the deal. Now, then you have Zelensky, and hopefully he's going to live up. I see he's trying to renegotiate the rare earth.
That was President Trump with reporters yesterday in the Oval Office. The Kremlin says it's working on a peace deal with Ukraine. After a weekend report that Trump was upset, angry with Putin for not moving in the right direction on a peace deal. Putin, meanwhile, has ordered 160,000 more troops to mobilize this week. Ukraine's President Zelensky claims Russia is dragging out the peace process in order to grab more land. Joining me now is Fox News senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane, back with me. General, great to see you. Assess this situation for us. How do you see it?
Yeah, great seeing you. Yeah, well, I think it's coming clearer into view what Putin is doing. It's an old Russian playbook that he's involved in here, which is, yeah, say you're interested in the ceasefire, interested in the peace agreement, but then throw a lot of obstacles and delays into that process. I mean, we're still negotiating the conditions of the original energy ceasefire, as well as some of the conditions for the Black Sea ceasefire. And the latest thing that Putin has thrown on the table is he wants some sanction relief before the Black Sea ceasefire is completed, much less go to the permanent ceasefire or a deal itself. So we're a long way away from all of that. The Trump team has come back from multiple sessions, obviously with the Russians, with the same skepticism that with no one certain that Putin is really serious about the ultimate objective of a peace agreement. That is where the president is, and it's certainly what are their options now. So they're looking at getting tough with Putin over a couple things. One is imposing some pretty tough sanctions on him, and the president has talked about that largely in the oil industry. And secondly, upgun Ukraine. And Putin will notice and care more about what happens on that battlefield than he will about sanctions. They believe they can manipulate around sanctions, Maria, and they have the evidence to prove it. But that battlefield really makes a difference to him. So that's what's in front of the president. He's got some decisions to make here, given where Putin is. And this is typical of what we have seen in Putin's behavior for a number of years. Yeah,
I mean, it certainly feels like he's just playing everybody, playing the president, playing the administration in terms of what he's going to do here. And then there's Iran, the supreme leader of Iran responding to President Trump's announcement that he could impose additional sanctions and his threats to bomb Tehran if a nuclear deal is not reached. Here's the Khomeini's comment, quote, "They threaten to attack us, which we don't think is very probable. But if they commit any mischief, they will surely receive a strong reciprocal blow." General, your reaction?
Yeah, well, that's typical of the Iranian response. I mean, they obviously threatened military action. They did the same with Israel. You notice that since Israel attacked them some months ago, they haven't responded to that attack. And that attack took away their air defense systems, 80% of their rockets and missiles, a quite significant attack. And what has the Israelis achieved as a result of that? It's called deterrence. And that is what we're about here. And the Iranian leadership, as we've said, are back on their heels in a way we haven't seen in 44 years. And President Trump is holding all the cards here, Maria. He's given them an ultimatum: stand your and dismantle your nuclear program, date certain, verification process in place. You don't do that, the consequences are clear. The supreme leader is threatening that they would attack U.S. bases if you do something like that. Yeah. I don't believe we're going to be the least bit intimidated by that, and we've got to keep our focus on what we really want here. Yeah. That nuclear enterprise completely dismantled.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you know, President Trump has been using some, you know, really harsh words recently. Hell is going to break out, and, you know, if you don't do this, all hell will break loose, and you know, something has to happen soon. He said a few of these things recently, and I'm wondering if this is really coming to a head right now, General. Do you believe that Israel will try to, destroy Iran's nuclear armament, and the U.S. would be supportive of that? I'm sure the U.S. would be supportive of it, but do you expect something to blow here and come to a head soon?
Yeah, I do. I think we're just weeks away from this.
Yeah.
And the president's on record. He's had multiple conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu over this. They're on the same page. Netanyahu is supporting the president's coercive diplomacy here to try to get the Iranians to voluntarily dismantle their program. If they don't do it, it'll be an Israeli-led, U.S.-supported strike on the Iranian nuclear enterprise. It's multiple sites. It's not an easy target. It's complicated. Some of it is deeply buried, 250 feet down into the ground. We have the capability to deal with that. We can put this program back on its heels for years. That's the reality of what's in front of us. And yes, it's coming to a decision pretty soon.
Yeah, it feels that way. Then there's China. This story about the ports is just fascinating to me. Now, China is delaying Hong Kong-based company CK Hutchison's plan to sell the 43 ports, including those 2 ports near the Panama Canal, to BlackRock and the BlackRock-led group. Xi Jinping reportedly angry over this sale. Li Ka-shing, of course, is the head of CK Hutchison. He does the deal with BlackRock to sell the ports. President Trump was happy about it, given the fact that, it's an American company as opposed to having to deal with the Chinese at the Panama Canal. Every sign was in Chinese, President Trump told us. Your reaction to now China getting involved, saying, wait a minute, we don't want this sale to go through.
Yeah, for China to impose one of their regulatory agencies on a deal like this in Hong Kong, even though they have control of Hong Kong, obviously, is kind of unprecedented. What's really going on here? China doesn't like the image it's portraying here. Those 2 ports at the Panama Canal have received huge publicity as a result of President Trump resenting the fact that China has, by virtue of owning those ports, one at each end, has control over the Panama Canal when, particularly if conflict breaks out in the Indo-Pacific region where the United States and China are involved with each other. They can do much here to impede the United States. That's it. It becomes a national security issue for the Trump administration. Now China resents the image that's being portrayed that they're losing influence here in Central America. So that's what this is about. It remains to be seen what happens here. I think it's likely the deal will still go through, maybe with some changes in conditions and some likely face-saving thing that'll take place, which is always very important to the Chinese. But we're moving in the right direction here. Get those ports out of the hands of China. And that's a Trump initiative executed by Rubio, and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, because these are really important shipping lanes. And that's what China's MO is. They want to dominate all the shipping lanes and the ports that are perhaps even near military installations so that they have clear shipping and trade across the world. And these ports are critical.
Yeah, there's 43 ports actually involved in this $23 billion deal.
Yeah.
So it is pretty significant. And the company, we have a private equity company well known in this country by the name of BlackRock that's involved in the deal on our side of it. Yeah, so I think this will play out in the next couple of weeks. We'll see what happens here. But it's moving in the right direction in the sense that a U.S. company will gain control of those ports.
General, it's great to see you this morning. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great talking to you, Maria, as always.
And to you, General Jack Keane.